I found out my boyfriend was cheating, so I left and never told him I was pregnant. Now, 7 years later, he showed up at my door demanding full custody of our son. I, 28F, have a 7-year-old son, Jack. His dad happens to be my ex-boyfriend, Zach, 28M, but I never told him about the pregnancy. Zach and I got together in college, and after we graduated, we got an apartment together and lived there for a while. At least I was. He and I were pretty serious about each other. I'm not sure about him anymore. I tried to talk to him about marriage once, but less than a month after that, I found out that he texted his ex and complained to her about how clingy I'd become. He told her he needed a break from me, so they planned to go on a romantic trip together. I had only found out about all of this because she'd replied to one of his texts at night, while he was asleep, and I saw the notification. He changed his password, but I knew what it was, so I unlocked his phone, checked out the text from his ex, and uncovered weeks' worth of text exchange between them where they were either talking about how stressed out he was with me or flirting like nobody's business. I was shattered when I found out, and cried myself to sleep because I was completely head over heels in love with him then. We'd been together for almost 3 years by then, so I thought that marriage was the next logical step and that he'd be okay with me discussing it. I didn't intend to marry that very second, but I just wanted to make sure it was on the cards for him at some point like it was for me. I wanted us to be on the same page, but unfortunately, he was reading another book. It was just that one night that I allowed myself to cry, but from the next day, I pretended as if nothing was wrong and behaved perfectly normally so he wouldn't get the hint that I knew about his cheating. He was supposed to go on that trip with his ex a few days after I found out, and I planned to stay with him for those few days and then, while he was away, romancing his ex, I'd leave without a word or an explanation and cut ties with him for good. And that's exactly what I did. I waited out for those couple of days, even though it was tough to bring myself to stay with a man who I knew had no love or respect for me, but I didn't want to confront him about the cheating. I just wanted to leave without a goodbye because I knew that would hurt him infinitely more. He told me he was going away on a business trip for the company, even though at the time, we were just starting, and neither of our jobs required us to travel much. But I didn't ask any questions and just wished him luck. After he left, I packed everything up in just one day and moved out. I'd already paid off half of the rent for the month, and I moved back home with my parents. I had a friend who lived in a different state, so I talked to my friend and told her everything, bought a one-way ticket to her city and moved in there. I talked to my employers at the office, and thankfully, they let me continue working remotely until my notice period was up. In the meantime, I found a job there and got my apartment there. It took me a couple of weeks, but my friend was helpful and there with me every step of the way. Zach couldn't contact me after I left because I did everything possible to prevent it. I changed my phone number, blocked him everywhere, and even told my friends and family about it so they wouldn't make the mistake of talking to him. And I had a couple of friends who lived in different states, so he wouldn't have been able to even if he wanted to find out where I was through trial and error. I highly doubt he'd even want to find me again in the first place, but I still wanted to make sure he couldn't, even if he wanted to. I didn't want to be found, and I thought that moving away from him and cutting him off would mean that I'd never have to see him or think of him again. That was until I found out that I was a couple of weeks pregnant. It was only a few weeks after I'd settled into my new apartment that I realized I'd missed a cycle, and so I took a pregnancy test. The result was positive, and since that was the first positive thing that had happened to me in a while, I decided to keep the baby. And it's been the best decision of my life ever. Despite whatever is happening right now, I still strongly believe that my son was my good luck charm because after I found out I was pregnant, my life took a turn for the better. I didn't want Zach to be a part of my baby's life, which I know he'd try to do if he found out about it. So I never told Zach about the pregnancy, and even though a lot of people disagreed with my decision, I stuck to it. And they also had the decency not to go on and tell them about it without my consent. That has lasted for 7 years, and now my son's in 2nd grade. I'm working in a good position in the same company that I started here at, and I've been in a relationship for a year now with my boyfriend, Mike. He's always happening. He told me I could think about what I wanted to do now. I could either be prepared to fight it out in court, or just be a decent human being for once, and give up custody of Jack so he'd have a better life. Then he left without saying anything, and I stood in shock for another 10 minutes. Luckily, my son was in school when Zach came by, so he didn't see his dad and didn't ask any awkward or difficult questions. It's been 3 days, and I still haven't told any of my friends that my father had never wanted to be a part of Jack's life, and so I was a single mother. But now I had to confess to him that I'd never asked Zach if he wanted to be a father. I just left after I found out that he was cheating and didn't even bother to correct myself after I found out that I was pregnant and that he'd been searching for me. Mike was a little upset that I lied to him about this, but he understood that these things were harrowing for me to talk about, and I would make sure that I kept him away from his son for almost a decade, and he would never have found out either if someone didn't snitch on me. I'm still trying to figure out who'd do such a horrible thing to me, and now I'm just baffled about whether what I did was right or wrong. I know it was unethical and kind of messed up, but to be fair, so was cheating on me. That wasn't fair to me, and what I did wasn't fair to Zach, so I think it's even for us. But Mike disagrees and thinks. Share your thoughts in the comments and follow for more interesting stories.